there, I'm Sandra, and thank you for joining me on my channel on Modern Living. Today I'm going to be showing you some tips and tricks on how I create fresh flower arrangements out of my garden and my perennial flower beds. The first thing I wanted to mention to you about is selecting a container to arrange in. Now, if you're like me, you've collected glassware over the years from gifts and other arrangements. If you don't have any glassware around that is suitable for arranging flowers in, I would suggest you stop by a secondhand shop or a thrift store and pick up a vase or some sort of arranging container. They're usually pretty inexpensive and generally less than $1 even. So it gives you lots of variety when you go to start arranging. The reason that I suggest you have some variety is you might want to consider what you have growing in your garden and pick a container accordingly. So there's kind of two ways to go about making a flower arrangement. One is to pick your container and then go out and hunt for flowers that will work well in that container. That can work really well if you have a large variety to pick from. It doesn't, however, work so well if you want to make an arrangement in this container and all the flowers in your garden are this tall. So I would suggest instead that you try the option that I use, and that is to go take a walk in your gardens, find what's blooming and growing and looking really, really nice, and then pick a container accordingly depending on the length of the stem. And sometimes it's going to be this one. The thing that I find works best for a really large container like one like this, first of all, it takes a lot of flowers to fill this. It's very heavy, and when it's arranged, it takes up a lot of space. So keep that in mind. I find what works best in a large vase like this is probably either sunflowers, or if you happen to have a lot of delphiniums in your garden, or perhaps daisies. Those are things with really long stems that you can often fill a vase this size. But do keep in mind it takes a lot. I find a vase this size is a little more practical if you want to have that upright arrangement, partly because it's got a smaller opening, so it takes a little less. It's a little bit easier to manage. It also fits in a smaller spot. This looks great on your kitchen counter, in the center of your kitchen table. Something like this in the center of your kitchen table is going to be really large because generally the flowers are probably going to be, this tall. So if you're sitting eating dinner, you want to be able to see around your flowers. So something like this might work a little better. I love this little square container, and I use it quite a lot for zinnias, and I'm going to do that today. I'm going to show you. I'm just going to make like a whole round arrangement. It's quite short, which makes it really nice, especially in a dinner table setting, because you can see over it to visit with the people that you're dining with. And it also it uses up some of those shorter stems. So sometimes I'll make a taller arrangement with the flowers I have that are bigger, and I'll make a smaller arrangement with some of the shorter flowers and put it as a complementary piece somewhere else in the house. So now that we've talked about glassware, let's go get started and see what we can find to pick and use in our flower arrangements. So one thing that I'll often use in especially those really big vase flower arrangements as a kind of a base foliage is hosta leaves. Now these are really large hostas, and the reason I stopped here is because they have such a nice long stem, and if you cut close to the base of that leaf, it gives you a nice long piece to put in the vase to use as a foundation piece. That's going to be key. So when you're picking flowers or picking foliage, you really want to think about the stem length that can go into the vase. So if this hosta only had a stem that big, it would be kind of useless for a fresh flower arrangement. So that's my first point. Make sure that you cut your stems long enough that they're useful in your vase. Let's keep going, see what we can find. Okay, so walking around my flower beds, I also have lots of hydrangea. These ones I like, but they're not that great for cut flowers, partly because they do have that shorter stem. So we're going to skip past those. I have also used as foliage peony leaves, which you often think of peonies just for their flower, but they do really have quite a nice foliage as well. So I've got a lot of flower beds at my house, as you can see. One thing that I always consider when I'm going to make flower arrangements am I willing to sacrifice these beautiful flowers outdoors to make an arrangement that's going to last only a short time indoors? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. So a few weeks ago I had Asiatic lilies here. They were absolutely fantastic. They're past now, but I did cut one stem to take inside the house because it had blown down in the wind and it was laying in the ground anyways, and you weren't going to be able to enjoy it outside. So I cut it off at the base, and I brought that stem of Asiatic lilies inside. So for me, sometimes it has a matter of whether I'm willing to sacrifice the outdoor color for the indoor enjoyment. These, I think, are actually going to be stargazer lilies. I can't remember. And I don't think I'll cut those to bring them in. Again, unless the wind knocks them down, because they're just so pretty outside, and they'll last a lot longer if I leave them out here. Once I cut them and take them inside, they only last a few days. So that's something to keep in mind. I have about 7 or 8 different kinds of hydrangeas growing at my house, and to be honest with you, I don't even remember what they're all called. But this is one of my favorites for cut flowers, partly because it does have those really long stems that I can go really low to the base, and I can have a long piece of flower here to work with. Also, they seem to last really well as cut flowers, and they grow abundantly as blooms, so I'm not afraid to cut those off and use them. This guy here, look, he broke there in the wind, so I'm going to cut him a little shorter, and I'll use him in one of my short arrangements because he's got a short stem. The echinacea here beside me definitely also would make a lovely addition to a flower arrangement. We'll just cut a couple of those. I don't want to cut too many again because I want to save them for outside, but I'll cut a few. Okay folks, so here's the deal. As far as I'm concerned, the real secret to having great looking flower arrangements all summer long for very little cost is to plant yourself zinnias and sunflowers. You can't get better bang for your buck. This row of zinnias, which is really big, the camera's not even catching a quarter of it. I planted for a $2 package of seeds, and I'm going to have beautiful flowers all summer long. Same thing with my sunflowers. These are actually sunflowers that came up from seed I bought last year. So I have another row further over in the garden with this year's seeds. Generally what happens is my sunflowers reseed themselves, and then I transplant them to be in the spots I want them. So when I see them coming up before we rototill the garden, we generally transplant the baby sunflower seeds that have started to along the ends of the rows, so I have sunflowers at the end of each row in my garden, and I also have them in a special row that I make just for sunflowers. As you can also see behind me, I have my asparagus that has grown out. We have a huge patch of asparagus that we eat in the spring. Once it's grown out in the summertime, I can pick some of that and use it like asparagus fern, like you see in professional flower arrangements. I just put the asparagus plant in like a fern, and it works really well. So I'm going to get busy picking here, and then once I've got collected my flowers, we'll go back over to the table and start arranging. So I grow this row of zinnias in my vegetable garden actually, and I'm never too worried about leaving flowers behind because I can't even see it from my house. I have to walk out to the garden. Now there's no way I've ever picked them all just because there's simply too many blooms, but I don't worry so much as like the same way I do when I'm in my flower beds around my house, where I want to make sure I leave things that look pretty, like the lilies I showed you. Here I just kind of harvest as much as I want, and I don't worry about it. They keep reflowering. If I cut them, they grow more, so what's there to lose? You'll notice though that I am cutting quite low in the base of the flower, because I want to have nice long stems to go in my vase. So I'm making sure that when I go in to cut, that I do get quite low to the bottom of the plant. Okay, so I think I have enough zinnias for my tall arrangement for sure. And now we're going to go over to my other row of zinnias, and I'll show you why they're the zinnias that I choose for my shorter square container. Just one second. Let's head on over. So this is my second row of zinnias, and as you can see, the flowers are a lot smaller than my other row, but they're still very, very pretty. Just going to lay those down, and these actually work really great, like I mentioned, in that smaller square container. So I don't need to cut these stems nearly as long because of what I'm doing with them. So I'm just going to cut them. I still want to have a little bit to work with, but I'm only cutting them like that length. I try to pick different colors and different lengths a little bit. Try to make sure that some of the flowers, it just seems in the package, there's never as many whites particularly. I don't know why, but I always try to make sure I pick one or two just so there's some variation. If you want to have monochrome, you could pick all pinks, you could pick all reds. Really, there's so many flowers in this row, you could pretty much do whatever you want. And I'm going to cut quite a lot because the key to that little square container looking so sweet is to have it really, really full. So I'm just going to cut quite a few zinnias here, and then we'll take them over to the table and get arranging. Honestly, a big row of flowers like this, I can pick as many as I want, and it's never going to all disappear. It's pretty awesome. So like I said, your $2 package of seed is really quite an awesome investment. I highly recommend you plant zinnias every year. Another great one that I didn't plant this year is snapdragons. Snapdragons are another one that just keep on giving. Rocket Mix is my preferred snapdragon for cut flowers, so definitely keep an eye on that when you're looking for flowers and seeds next year. Okay, so I think I've got just about enough here for my small square container. The beauty of it is if I don't, I can always run back over to the garden in a little bit, grab a few more, and pop them into the vase as well. So let's go get started arranging. Okay, so we've got our flowers and we've got our two different containers. We're going to start first, I think, with the little square container, because sometimes I find that the easier one to work with. So we'll just set the tall one to the side. Now remember, we're using all these little short guys that we cut. First things first, make sure your container is clean. Really scrub it, make sure there's no residue in there from a previous flower arrangement. That's going to be key in having it last longer and stay fresh. Second tip I have for you, this is a little thing that I've just kind of found on my own from trial and error, is if you put a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in your water, it stays fresh longer. Now a little bit, a teaspoon, half a teaspoon, something like that, it'll help it. And if you see your water start to get skanky, then just pour it out and put in fresh water. So that's my first tip with you to making your arrangement last longer. Make sure your container's clean and that you've got really fresh water. The second thing is you're going to want to take off the stems that would normally be in the water. Now how long you want this is going to depend on how big you want your arrangement. I want my flowers to sit fairly close. You can always cut more off. You can't stick it back on. So I just want them to hang out over the end. And I quite literally just make a crisscross pattern to get started. So I just kind of make some X's here. And I keep going and filling in. And as you get more and more flowers in there, it builds up the height. And eventually, your flowers will be like a little ball in your whole arrangement. So stay tuned. I'm just going to keep working away here. So you'll see often I'm sticking a flower in, I'm checking it out, and then I might bring it back out and give it another snip. Just because like I said, it's easier to take it off than it is to put it back on. So I always stick it in. You're like, that might be a little bit too long. I'll just take another little snip off of there and I'm good to go. Now because I'm using small bloomed flowers, it's going to take a lot to fill this little container, but the effect is really very cool because it's just a lot of texture, a lot of depth, and I think it looks really neat. Did any of you play Kerplunk as a kid, that game with the marbles and the sticks? I feel like this is kind of like Kerplunk in reverse. I'm trying to stick the sticks in instead of pull them out. So I definitely find that the trickiest part of this arrangement is filling in the top. Sometimes there's like holes in the top and it's just a little bit trickier, but just keep sticking those flowers in there, and the nice little cross zigzag pattern that you've been making by sticking them in at different angles will definitely help to hold these top ones upright, as well as all the little bit of leaves that you've left on for foliage. And there you have it. A beautiful little sweet flower arrangement that will fit just about anywhere in your home. It makes a great table center, and I find zinnias like this will last probably 5 to 7 days easy, no problem in your house, and look absolutely beautiful. Okay, so moving on to our taller vase. I do find this arrangement a little bit trickier to make, partly because we're using different kinds of flowers. Now I don't have a ton of variety today because my Shasta daisies are pretty much past, as are my delphiniums, and a few other things that I had been using in weeks gone by. So we're pretty much stuck with our large zinnias, with a few hydrangea and a few echinacea, as well as some hosta leaves. So the first thing you're going to decide is whether you want your arrangement to be one-sided, like only look nice from the back, or to be round. I think today we're going to make a round arrangement because I find that a little bit easier to get started with. Now it is a bit windy out here today, as you can see, so my hosta leaves are going to be a little bit tricky to kind of keep in place to get started. But I'm definitely going to want to have some foliage. Hosta leaves work great. Like I said, peony leaves work. Also asparagus fern, but I find a real good base to start with is probably key. Now these guys, if I was making a one-sided, you know what, maybe we'll go one-sided because of these big leaves. They're going to work as the backdrop, and my flowers are going to be arranged in front of them. So the first thing I'm going to find is some tall flowers. Now again, how much I cut off depends on how tall I want this arrangement to be. So if I don't want it to be super huge, let's just see how that works. That's probably too tall even. But again, like I said before, you can always cut it off. Putting it back on, not so easy. And we're just going to keep cutting some flowers and sticking them in the vase. I tend to work thinking, especially with a one-sided arrangement, in terms of a triangle. So if I have a tall one here, then I'm going to want to put 2 out to either side that are a little bit shorter. I happen to have 3 the same color, so why not? Let's not make it symmetrical here. And again, things are going to keep moving, so I'm just going to keep arranging them. And I'm actually going to put it a little bit to the side here so I can see what I'm doing a bit better. Hold on a second. Hopefully you can see too, no problem. Okay. And again, I'm just going to keep working at sticking those in. Now again, those green leaves that I have left behind on that foliage are going to help to hold their neighbors upright. They're going to fill things in at the base, but I don't want to have too much sticking into the water, or it does start to make the water go off quicker. I've got quite a collection of zinnias here to work from. Oh, that's too tall. Again, just peeling off my leaves, sticking them in, pulling them out, adjusting accordingly, giving them a little spin if the pretty side is facing away, trying to vary up the colors. Honestly, these are so pretty. I don't think that it can't not look good when we're done. Now when it comes to the front, I'm going to want to put some smaller ones in the front, because remember, this is a one-sided arrangement, so it's going to be going somewhere where there's like a back against the wall probably. So let's just see. I want to make sure I've got some pretty stuff right here at the front that's going to be a little bit shorter. So remember, I cut that hydrangea and it was a little bit short. Let's stick him in there. Yeah, and we got some echinaceas here. Hold on one second. I got to grab my snips on this side. We're not going to cut him. Oh, he just bent. Boo, that's sad. Yeah, we're not going to be able to use him. He broke. Isn't that so sad? Okay. Bye, echinacea. It was a nice thought. And we'll get this hydrangea in there too. Now, he's a little bit bigger, so let's stick him up the back here a little bit. Oh, that's too tall. I don't know. Is that working okay? Let's see. Okay, so it's really tall and skinny. I want to get some more coming out the sides here. So I'm just going to look for some that are maybe a little smaller. Have them come this way. So I got to put it in on the angle so it angles itself out a little bit. I wish I had some German status or some baby's breath. That would be nice. But we're just going to work with what we've got for today. Again, these are arrangements that I'm just making out of my garden, so I find it's just best to work with what you've got, and that way you can enjoy it. Enjoy the outside, inside. Okay, let me just see. I got to turn this around 1 second. Okay, so I'm not going to win any floral designing arrangements with this one, any contests, but it is starting to look really quite nice. I'm going to add a little orange guy over here. There, that little pop of color is nice on that side there. And it's really difficult because of this wind to make sure that these hostas are going to be where I want them to be. So when I get this arrangement inside, I'm probably going to just kind of fix it up a little bit. But it gives you the gist of it. So again, I started, like I said, with something tall on the top, and then I put some in the sides, and I just kind of keep filling in around because I want to make a nice, beautiful arrangement. Now again, like I said, I'm not winning any floral design competitions, but that's not really the goal. My goal is to bring my beautiful flowers from my garden inside my house and to enjoy them. And I hope that you'll do the same. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it sure is pretty either way. So thank you for watching. I hope you picked up a few tips. Again, like I said, a clean container is key, fresh water, and add a little bit peroxide to it. That gives you the great foundation for whatever you're cutting in your gardens to arrange for in your house. And I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. Thank you.